Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. Okay, getting around to that 22 double. Not until tomorrow, though. Today, there's no news. Okay, thanks, everybody. See you later. And, well, there wouldn't be any news. If there was news, I wouldn't be able to tell it to you, at least not in written form. I had a little trouble today. Some of you, maybe one of you anyway, Justice noticed. And, I don't know how many of the rest of you noticed, although maybe this ends up saving us time and effort in the long run anyway. But usually we put up our morning post notifying everybody who happens to wander by and look in the diaries and see at 8:45 that I've posted that the show will be live at 9 a.m. And I don't know how many of you, if any, depend on that post being there for a link to easily and conveniently click through to the live show, or have it bookmarked and don't actually need the thing. I don't know. I'm not certain what kind of service it's actually providing. But it's tradition. And so we do it because we are hidebound traditionalists, if nothing else, here at the Progressive Radio Show. Well, okay. At any rate, I went to put together a post as usual yesterday. I'll do that last thing before turning in very often. To give myself some idea of what the stories might be, but I should probably abandon that practice too, so I can get these things done earlier and, go to bed or something like that. But at any rate, I went to put the story together, and I was having some trouble with the Daily Kos editor page. Now, I have to tell you about this on the radio, as boring as it is, because I can't post a story about it at Daily Kos asking, hey, are any of you having trouble with this thing? I guess I could do this on Twitter later on. But at any rate, just opening a story page and an attempt to post the thing, I was able to, as usual, enter the title, put up a picture or a graphic, select from among the library, etc., put the tags in and everything like that. But when I went to click on the area of the editor page where you put the body of the post, no dice. It just wasn't working. So, that's interesting. So now my phone is going crazy now with messages from the school bus monitoring app that I've got. And wow, boy, it's just giving me alert after alert after alert. So that's super fun. Anyway, big distraction, but nothing else. Anyway, so it just wouldn't let me enter any text, It was very odd, and it was happening last night. It kept happening. I logged out, logged back in, shut down the computer, went back in. I'm sure that there's probably cookies somewhere I can purge, and maybe that will help. I don't know. I put a help ticket in and bothered the helpers. Hi, helpers. I need your help doing something simple and basic that, usually comes down to try turning it off and turning it back on again. Well, whatever. At any rate, we turned off the posts for the day, and maybe they'll help us turn them back on again. The show is ready to go, and it's here. And if you're here, you're having no problems, and you never needed these posts in the first place. Okay, so that's where we are. I think I've had about 19 notices that the bus is nearby. So that's good news. I imagine that my son is getting on it and going to school. That would be terrific too. And then, what about the rest of the things happening in the world and in the country? Well, let's see. Some developments, I guess, on the legal front, both down in Florida in Pervalago and in Florida now, because Ron DeSantis is being sued by the people he duped into getting onto a plane and kidnapped and sent to Massachusetts. And as Greg mentioned yesterday, there were people who observed very cleverly, what the hell did you expect to happen? You sent them to Lawyer Island, and that's true. And so Judd Legum and his popular info newsletter, which was really hard on the story yesterday, is chasing the same story today and has the details of the suit. But essentially, all of the defenses that DeSantis has been offering that all the flights, everybody on the flight was there voluntarily and they all signed waivers, etc., of course, are starting to fall apart as the migrants themselves speak up and testify and speak to lawyers who happen to live on Martha's Vineyard and nearby. And so, not going too well in terms of the allegations being made, which are essentially that they were offered incentives to fill out consent forms that were only partially translated from Spanish. No real chance that they had a good look at what they were doing. And of course, they were coerced to, the story is that they were coerced to sign the things. They were offered $10 McDonald's gift cards, I guess, if they would sign these consent forms, which again were only partially translated into Spanish. And that's supposed to suffice for informed consent. Well, we'll see. Anyway, by the way, for those who entertain the pet theory that it was Christina Pushaw posing as Perla to get the migrants to sign up and get on a plane, I mean, probably a pretty low percentage, just in terms of, I don't think that she would bother herself in going, but she might want to pull some kind of stunt off for DeSantis. Anyway, it turns out that I guess she matches the description. The migrants are telling people who are inquiring, including the Bexar County Sheriff now down in Texas, I guess, that's dispatched some people to question them in Massachusetts, or has received their testimony anyway in the form of affidavits. I'm not certain how their mechanics of the interviews are going, but they do describe Perla as a blonde woman, although I assume she spoke to them in Spanish, and I don't know whether that's in Pushaw's skill set or not. I think she can do Russian, but seriously, I think she actually can do Russian. But Spanish may or may not be in her wheelhouse. Anyway, one among many stories that we need to catch up on, and the rest of them are here in the form of Greg Dworkin. So good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. So, most of what I'm going to do today is directly from this morning's Pundit Roundup.
Okay.
I usually have like 50 things I give David, so we can't find anything, but right. I only put up about 5 or 6 because there's really a couple of 3 big stories. Of course, there's the migrant stuff, as you were talking about, and Judd Ligum's doing a great job covering it.
Yes.
And, when you read it, you don't get the Bexar County pronunciation guide.
No, but
it's
I did see
Bexar. And it's funny because people from there will call it Bexar when they leave the area and try to sell their stuff, based on the name.
Look for me in Bexar County.
But Bexar County is what it is down there. And the thing is that, the original GOP talking point is, this is just political nonsense. Ted Cruz said, we have sheriffs in Texas here that just do all the time stuff here that doesn't really matter, except when it matters.
Yeah. Right, when it's one of theirs.
And it matters for us when it's one of ours, of course.
The constitutional sheriff.
Nothing like border stunts. Those are all real when Republican sheriffs do it.
Right.
But when Democratic sheriffs do it, then it's all just for political headlines. Well, that has nothing to do with the migrant suit itself, the class action lawsuit. I mean, the point of the matter is, and we were talking about this yesterday when we were talking about the reverse freedom rides, things don't always end on a legal note, but this one is just so representative of the poorly thought out stuff that DeSantis does. I mean, it's just reminiscent of his voting fraud scheme.
Yeah, I mean, this is all just why don't you justism as policy. And I mean, remember that this is his audition for running for president, and as much as it works for the base,
it doesn't work for everybody else.
Yeah,
and that's
it doesn't
exactly
work
right.
Legally,
and
he doesn't
it actually
have
causes problem for him. And I don't know if there's going to be legal stuff over the fact that the state of Florida said it was okay to vote, and then the state of Florida says you're arrested. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but on the face of it, I would think that's not right.
It's not going to help with juries.
That ain't right.
Yeah, juries are not going to appreciate that.
Right. So, having done that and gotten caught at it, let me just double down and do something even more egregious and even more of a setup, because now we're involving people outside the state of Florida that I don't control.
And who aren't a problem for us, by the way.
But the point is, I don't control. See, when you're the governor of Florida, you have undue political influence everywhere on the universities, where you could tell the professors not to go testify on suits against your political interests, and the doctors and hospitals, where you could tell to suppress information about the, shootings like in Parkland. You have incredible power as governor, different than Abbott, let's say, in Texas. Where you, or more akin maybe to like Pennsylvania, where you could appoint the Secretary of State. When you start taking your crusade out of Florida and you start going to Lawyer Island in Massachusetts, which again has different laws.
Yeah, and they don't care about
for example, if you apply for a temporary visa in Massachusetts, you get to stay, and you might be a little bit protected from I have to be in San Antonio this evening, whereas that may not be true in any other state. So,
Maybe.
But he doesn't know the Massachusetts laws, and he doesn't really care. He just wanted that Fox News footage without thinking that this it's like putting the Thanks Brandon stickers on the gas pumps. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Right. But now they're stuck with them as gas prices drop.
Exactly. Well, I didn't think about that. Well, good.
It's just doubly, as they thought they were being so clever with the, I did that, and now that could be it. That message could go the other way. If you had a message on there with a sticker of Joe Biden saying, I'm dumb, well, that'll stay the message forever, and maybe it doesn't make any sense, but, well, try to look towards the future. See if you can figure out what might happen. That's what people are looking for when they're looking for a new president or a leader. Can they do things? Do they have policies? Can they have a decent chance of predicting what's going to happen in the future because they got their head screwed on right, or are they just an idiot? Well,
yeah, listen, I mean, when it comes to bamboozling the press, Ron DeSantis is no Glenn Youngkin.
Right, that's true. Well, it is.
Actually, Glenn Youngkin no longer is any
That's
Glenn
true,
Youngkin.
too. It's falling apart for him as well. Good.
Why did Glenn Youngkin come to prominence? Not because he's a political genius. Not because he wears fleece vests.
Oh, wait a minute. I guess
it's because the pandemic screwed up schooling and parents were mad and wanted to take it out on somebody. It's that simple. Not going to be duplicated again.
Probably not.
DeSantis is making a name for himself, but it's not especially a good one. Yes, it may work in Florida. He may win the Florida primary. Great. There's more to life than a Republican Florida primary. Actually, there's polling out suggesting that he would do okay in the Florida primary, and he wouldn't do okay against Trump nationally.
No. All right.
Okay, fine, But frankly, who's the bigger jerk? Is yet to be determined.
Yes. I don't know. We'll see. And I hope, they're standing near windows when they find out.
Well, in any case, so there's that. So we'll follow that story.
All right.
And then, of course, there's Russian mobilization. Right. Russia's admitted they're losing, and therefore they've admitted they're desperate. I know this because of what they did. This is the Washington Post. Oh. Russia pushes the panic button and raises risk of nuclear war.
That other panic
How's that?
button.
How's that for a headline?
Wow, that's lousy news-wise. I mean, it's
what
true.
Many watchers of the war in Ukraine fear is about to happen. Separatist leaders in 4 enclaves controlled by Russian forces and their proxies announced a referendum to be staged Friday through Tuesday to decide whether the territories would join Russia. So,
democracy.
This is a election in doubt. We don't know if it's going to be 98.2 or 99.1% join Russia because everything is free and fair there. The thing is, what they do is they plop a new Russian border down and then say anybody who crosses that border is declaring war on Russia. And therefore, anything that Russia does in response is purely defensive.
Yes, right. So if it's
and
actually
they say
Ukraine,
that as if anybody's going to believe them or that it's going to work. I mean, they can't win with the elite troops they have now. So how conscripts, which are going to take 6 months to dredge up, are going to somehow change how the war goes is, shall we say, unclear. What they're obviously doing is risking instability, political instability, in St. Petersburg and Moscow, the only parts of Russia that matter to Putin, because that's where the oligarchs live.
Yeah. Well, so I guess that's the plan now. Is they hurry through one of these. I don't know what you would call them, but a ballot. They'll have a vote that they'll, I don't know how they rig their votes, but I assume that they will.
Well, they count,
But they just
was
say
it Stalin?
or they count first and then vote second.
I want to be the one that counts the votes.
Right. I mean, I don't know exactly what their preferred mechanism
Don't make it
is.
difficult.
Whether that's,
Marjorie Taylor Greene and the
ballots.
Georgia folks and all those, Trump acolytes are just making it far too complicated. You don't need to get the innards of the voting machines and try to program your own stuff. You just announce what the vote total
I guess that's their preferred method, I suppose. But so they'll declare these portions of Ukraine which they still occupy to, in fact, have voted to join Russia, and therefore it is now Russian national territory. And if the Ukrainians who owned it last week attempt to take it back from the people who invaded it and declared it to be theirs, that will be an invasion of the Russian homeland and justify
exactly
any
right.
kind of
And so
response.
everybody in Russia will back us because nobody wants to see Russia invaded. They're already afraid of that in Belgorod. Right, so we'll just make it, and then they'll back us because patriotism and World War II. And no, I don't think so.
For that matter.
So how are they going to conduct the vote? Probably the way they do in the House of Representatives. They'll take a voice
15
vote.
15 minutes,
and then whoever's in the chair decides who won.
That could be it, right?
The ayes have it. Well,
Yeah.
I would like to suggest that we have a count. No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's
In this
not the
particular
freest,
case, no.
fairest thing.
Bang the gavel. The ayes have it. We win.
Right. And even if they were to actually hold a vote, I mean, part of the problem with this whole thing is anybody in those areas who was pro-Ukrainian and wanted to stay in Ukraine has probably fought and died and is not available to vote in the plebiscite. So,
well, we'll just do it online so everybody has a fair chance.
Okay. Well, that would be helpful. It's dangerous to go out there and vote.
Yeah. So we'll just we'll count what comes up online. How do you know what we got? Well, we'll tell you. Don't worry.
It's easy that way.
So, Defense Secretary and of the Minister of Defense in His Majesty's United Kingdom. And I was trying to figure out, perhaps there's some experts here in our listeners, when Ian Fleming first started writing the Bond books, were the very, very first in His Majesty's Secret Service? Or did the titles change? And if they reissue it, does that change too? I mean, we know the monarch looking left versus looking right on the money changes every time they have a monarch change. But we don't know about the Fleming books, and that's important. But in any case, in that country, the Minister of Defense says President Putin's breaking of his own promises not to mobilize parts of his population and the illegal annexation of parts of Ukraine are an admission that his invasion is failing. He and his defense minister have sent tens of thousands of their own citizens to their deaths, ill-equipped and badly led. No amount of threats and propaganda can hide the fact that Ukraine is winning this war, and the international community are united, and Russia's becoming a global pariah. So that's all true. I suppose Biden will say so at 10 o'clock when he goes to the UN. And, of course, New York being a happening city, when he's done, then Letitia James gets to make a big announcement that something's happening in New York, and she'll say so at 10:30. And it's so big, she made sure not to schedule it at the same time Biden was speaking, but she won't say what it's about.
Okay, well, that's
so maybe she'll declare the pandemic is over. I don't know.
Yes, perhaps.
Hint to professionals, it's not over.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. They've caused all sorts of problems for themselves now in the White House by speaking off the cuff about this. They may have meant an entirely different thing, or
it's
partially different thing, but that thing was said.
Guy.
It wasn't right, and it was said, and now we have to deal with it.
Yep.
It's going to make makes appropriations difficult because now everybody will be, Ted Cruz will be quoting it on the floor, and we'll all have to say, "Yeah, I know he said it. We don't agree."
Yeah. So moving on to the next story here, I think the next story is just a slew of polls that came out. And by the way, this is going to be a relatively short segment for me today. It's not going to be the original promised 20-minute segments we started with some weeks ago when I first started doing the show with you. but it's not going to be a full hour, so I'll only have a little bit after the break.
This is an outrage.
I
protest.
As they say in Blazing Saddles, you're on your own.
Okay.
So I was looking at the 538 this morning because there was a slew of polls from Georgia.
Okay.
About the race there, and just some observations. These are the last 6 or 7 generic ballot echelon insights for registered voters, for example, has Democrats +7. Echelon Insights for likely voters has Democrats +5. Morning Consult for likely voters, Democrats +4. A group called On Message, which is the Senate Opportunity Fund. That's, I think, the Republican version. Likely voters has Republican +3 in the generic ballot. Rasmussen has Republicans +1. Data for Progress has Republicans +2. Siena for New York Times has Democrats +2. Ipsos Reuters has Democrats +4. YouGov has Democrats +4. And NBC News had even. And all of those are improvements for the Democrats overall. And that gives them a 1.5-point lead in the generic ballot. Now, I don't even see Fox News here. And Fox News had +3, which would, according to their model, give the Republicans a single gain seat in the House. See, the point here is that it's really difficult to poll people, and it's even especially difficult this year because we have these two competing streams. We know that we have Democrats who are energized by abortion issues and democracy, and we know that we have Republicans who are energized by crime and immigration, and everybody's energized about the economy, but food prices are going up while gas prices are going down. And so there's lots of cross currents here. And so what is a likely voter? Who is the voter that's most likely to turn out? What about younger voters who are more motivated by the environment than older voters? Will they come? Will they turn out? Nobody knows. That's why Dave Wasserman was writing for NBC News and says, here's the 31 seats or the 10 or the 8 kind of seats that'll determine what's going on. And they're all toss-ups. And toss-ups mean we don't know who's going to win. And so that's the current state of the race. It really is a toss-up. We really don't know who's going to wind up winning the House. Nobody should predict that the Democrats do. We don't know that. Yes, it's true that people are being motivated by abortion, but all those other things are motivating Republicans as well. Trump's not on the ballot. Does that mean that things that are, Trump +2 versus R +2, are they the same? Are Trump voters Republican voters? We don't know that either. Enough so that all of these things are going to be competitive. And just to take that in a microcosm, there's recent polling from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which shows a poor environment for Democrat with likely voters, even though Raphael Warnock still maintains a slight lead, I think, or if not, he only trails by a point or so. Marist, which shows a much more robust Democratic response, but they're looking at registered voters and not likely voters. And then this CBS poll that's out this morning, Raphael Warnock 51, Herschel Walker 49. And they talk about the fact that the voters' rationales for supporting each of the candidates are quite different. Warnock has better favorables, better character measure, and Walker's voters have an eye on Washington and a chance for a Republican senator. And I don't really care if they send a ham sandwich there.
Then they might, because he's a bit of a ham sandwich.
Right. So most Georgia registered voters say they like how Warnock handles himself, and most also say he has strong moral character, is a good role model, and has the right experience, is honest and is truthful, but I'm a Republican, so, I'll vote for the other guy. Now, do people really do that sometimes?
Hope not, but
in Georgia,
it's true.
We have the rare bird, or the split ticket voter who might vote for Brian Kemp, the Republican, at the top of the ticket and vote for Warnock. So, again, there's a whole bunch of cross currents going on, Georgia being a perfect example that make it really difficult to predict what's happening. So, in the current environment with things as they are right now, if the election were held today, nobody really knows who wins the Senate. Nobody really knows who wins the House. That, admittedly, is a huge improvement for Democrats compared to a month ago or 6 weeks ago when people were still talking about a red wave. That doesn't exist. That's gone. That's,
Okay.
as Ron Ziegler might tell President Nixon, that's an inoperative statement.
Good. But yeah, I was struck when you were talking about the Georgia things about Democrats ending up with a 1.5 lead in the generic ballot, and that would result in only a smaller Republican victory. Just brings us back to the gerrymandering issue and problem in general, that if the population at large generally favors Democrats, that just means you'll be ruled by a couple less Republicans than you originally thought.
Right. Or, that's the truth. But if you want to sanitize the truth, what you'll point out is that Republicans have structural advantages when it comes to elections.
Yes, that does.
And leave it at that and not explain that the reason that happened is they cheat.
Yeah. Well, okay. That puts it bluntly. Yeah. I mean, how else can you explain it? That's what more people prefer. And yet you're getting the opposite. Huh? Okay. I guess that's fine.
Well, that's what they mean by structural advantage.
Yes.
And when, at least that's in the House, it's gerrymandering. Of course, there's no gerrymandering in the Senate. With the Senate, you do it with the electoral vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're voting for president. And when you're voting for senators, then you just...
then you can't. Then that's why the Senate is actually probably the opposite of what everybody intended when they came up with this system. The House is a lot less fair than the Senate.
Well, when they came up with the system, they just said, well, the state legislature will decide who gets to be the senators, and those things are gerrymandered, so we'll cover it that way.
Yeah. So they figured the House is the fair one, and the Senate, the oligarchs decide. And in fact, in modern times, it's the Senate that's more fair.
Yeah, except that they're apportioned so poorly. But yeah, that's the other. That's the way they cheat it on that side. And instead, everybody gets, there's 5 people in Wyoming who have 2 senators.
That's why we are a republic and not a democracy.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Maybe. It's just because they say it a lot.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or 2 would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, Republicans are cheaters, and it's rotten, and we can't stand it anymore.
Yeah, anyway, so we do have a bunch of other stories that at least we should cover lightning round style, if nothing else.
Good.
Here in Connecticut, the big story, of course, is Alex Jones because of what's happening in Texas.
Again. That makes it interesting.
Why? Said Elizabeth Williamson of the New York Times last night at 8 o'clock. Breaking, big setback for Alex Jones in his bankruptcy case.
All right. What is it?
Federal bank judge Christopher Lopez in Houston has tossed out both Jones' lawyer and his chief restructuring officer in this bankruptcy situation. The judge cites transparency issues, including personal expenses by Jones. Too long didn't read, and it's only like 2 more tweets. Alex Jones is claiming bankruptcy, and he's out of money, but somehow or other he could afford $80,000 for security to go testify in Connecticut to the other families.
Oh. Yeah, that's a good question. Sure.
So Judge Lopez says, I don't like that. I don't like where we are. I hope I never have to make another decision like this as long as I'm on the bench. But what he did is expand the power of the Department of Justice Subchapter 5 trustee to run Jones' businesses from now on, citing a lack of candor. He says somebody completely independent is needed to run InfoWars, citing concerns with disclosure, lack of candor, and the $54 million debt to an LLC partly owned by his family. and the need to investigate insider relationships. And he's authorizing the trustee to hire outside counsel and help with no connection to any of these cases to assist you, he said to Jones.
Interesting.
There has to be greater transparency, and it isn't a comment on the professionals, but Jones' bankruptcy claim has hit some serious speed bumps, and if he can't go bankrupt, then he's going to owe the money to these Connecticut families.
All right.
So I just thought I'd let you know.
That is interesting. So they need an independent bankruptcy trustee. I'll do it, I guess. I don't know.
Well, but the thing is, whether it's Trump and the shell companies that he uses for various real estate transactions so he can hide where the money is coming from Russia, and, all the things that people do that they're so clever, there's a greater, bigger theme here. And this also has to do with the other big story of the day, which is, of course, Judge Deary, who is the special secret probation master, who's looking at the documents as to what's classified and what's not classified. And he said to Trump's attorney, he said, tell me how you determine that this is classified. And Trump's attorney said, we can't do that because we may need that in a criminal defense later because we're criming here.
Right.
So the judge said, well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't, he quote said, you can't have your cake and eat it. They're either classified, and you have to tell me and show me that you declassified them if you want to claim otherwise. And if you can't show me that you declassified them, then they're classified. And if they're classified, they go back to the government.
Yeah. I mean,
and so Trump's response is going to go run back to the protective judge that he bought and say to Cannon, he's not doing what we wanted him to do. Fire him, overrule him, do something. And so we'll see how that plays out. But that's pretty much what's happening. And I'm not a lawyer, but that's about as close to reality as, you can get from looking at all the proceedings.
I think so. Yeah, it's very weird. But, essentially, there's a real judge who says, okay, so what's the status of these documents? And I don't know.
And meanwhile, the 11th Circuit heard the pleadings from both sides. And, it's supposed to be an emergency, hearing. So, let's hear already.
I guess.
They had to present by yesterday. They did. How long does this take?
He's right. It was a hearing, not a deciding. Now you heard it. Hurry up. What's the answer?
Anyway, so we have all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is whether it's Alex Jones or whether it's Donald Trump, it's one thing to go on cable or get interviewed by the New York Times or have John Barron make a few calls to the Times. You can lie your butt off all you want to. In those circumstances, there are no penalties.
Right. Not like it's a high tribunal.
You can't lie to a high tribunal. You can't lie to the judge. And the attorneys know that, and that's why they're trying to have their cake and eat it. They want to imply that Trump might have declassified this stuff, but they don't want to say it, because if they say it, they're lying, and lying to the judge is an offense, a criminal offense, and they can get sanctioned, and they could lose their case because of it. So they're trying to weasel out of doing it, and Judge Cannon, their judge, said, yeah, it's okay, fine. I'll accept the fact that it's ambiguous. And Judge Deary, the appointed special secret probation master, said, no, what is it? It's one or the other. Tell me. Show me. What do you got?
Well, it's good he doesn't have patience for that.
So you can't do that in court. No. So eventually, this stuff catches up with you. Eventually. And sure, you could look at a Judge Cannon and say, well, between what Kavanaugh did and what Cannon does, all of this stuff is corrupt and yada, yada. But, it's like looking at pollsters. There's really good pollsters like Siena and Monmouth, and then there's, Trafalgar and Rasmussen. Not all pollsters are the same. Not all judges are the same. Most of the judges are actually pretty good. Most of the pollsters are pretty good. And so, on balance, if you keep playing the system, you're going to run up against a judge who's honest and, tries to follow the law the way they see it. And that being the case, Trump's in trouble because you can't lie. It catches up with you. Alex Jones can't lie. It catches up to him. He's already guilty. This is all about how much he owes, and so he tried to lie in court about how much he had, and that was the whole bankruptcy thing. He failed.
All right, cool. I'm for that.
So let's see it happen at the Trump level.
Yes, I'd like to see
him
that.
fail too. You can't lie.
Yeah. Empty Wheel has another theory on that, by the way. I'll just throw out there quickly that in addition to, I think it's still the case that they realize they don't want to lie on the record because they can get sanctioned. But she was just pointing out there, she thinks that the chief motivation for not giving a clear and sensible declaration about the declassification story is more because their only strategy, it isn't a legal strategy. It's simply, well, we need to delay things. So we're just going to give a nonsensical answer. And the judge, even a straight judge who wants to play it right, is going to have to scratch his head and issue orders for a while trying to clarify this thing. And any days that we can buy, we're glad to buy that way. And so to stop thinking of it as a legal strategy.
Well,
and
but that's
think
what
of
they
it as
did at the
delay
11th
strategy.
Circuit. I think it was the 11th Circuit where they essentially said to the 11th Circuit judges, listen, the Department of Justice hasn't proved they're classified. Let them prove it.
Right.
And after they prove it, we'll go ahead and argue about this minor discussion about the paper property and disposition of boxes.
It is really rather remarkable. Well, you have to prove that the documents are classified. Well, they say classified on them. Is that not enough for you? Not for us. We're crazy. I see. All right. Well, so now, does the court say, well, we really have, I know it's a pain in the butt, but we got to convince them.
The government's never had to prove they were classified before, and so they probably don't know how to do it. And it's going to take them a while to come up with a strategy, and that buys us time.
Right, yeah. So there's definitely that running in the background.
But if you have like a normal judge, the judge will look at them and say, you know what, that's bullshit.
Yeah, well, that's right. And we even have that on tape already.
That's bullshit.
I like it with the horn in it and everything. I love to play that. But it's true.
I mean, I have this vision. He's not a good guy because he worked for Trump in the first place and enabled half the stuff. And that, that's true with people like Bill Barr. If you do one good thing at the end, it doesn't mean your entire career of doing bad things up until that point is excused. But there's this fellow named Eric Hirschman who was a lawyer for Trump in the White House. And I guess he worked at OLC, Office of Legal Counsel. And so, he was advising Trump all along. And then, he started to say things like, guys, you're crazy. No, we can't do that January 6th. And among the many things he said is that, hey, you're taking documents that don't belong to you. You have to return them.
That won't work.
It won't work. And he's, shall we say, very colorful in his language when he explains how he spoke to other people around him. Yes. No, he came in and he told me that, and I said, look, this is, that's bullshit, pretty much. So I keep having visions of what if Eric Hirschman were at the 11th Circuit hearing this case? What if people who think like him were hearing this case? There are such people. And the Trump people tried to say, well, it's up to the government to prove that it's classified. Well, you know what? This isn't. It is really. It's pretty incredible, and I don't know if everybody really. Well, I guess by now we all grasp it. We've heard it enough, but it's truly remarkable that they're standing there saying, you have to prove that these things are classified. In fact, I'm not even the defendant. Nobody has proven that I'm Donald Trump. Why am I here? I'm leaving. I'm out of here until you can prove it to me. I think you've gone maybe a little bit overboard on that. And there's a reason those gavels are shaped like hammers. Judges use them. Yeah, exactly. So wait a minute. We have a counteroffer, Judge. We suggest that the government has to prove they're actually the government.
Right. I don't know that they're the government.
And until they prove they're the government, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they bought my line. I spent the entire Trump administration saying Congress needed to stop accepting at least Democratic Congress.
Who do you think I learned?
Accepting. Yeah, there you go. Right. Stop accepting communications from the White House as if they really came from the president. You don't know that they came from the president. First of all,
do you have the piece of paper in your hand?
I didn't see him sign it. Make him come here and sign the thing. Why is this? How do I know you nominated this person to be a judge on the Supreme Court? By
the way, here's breaking news out of Russia.
Oh.
Russian airlines ordered to stop selling tickets to Russian men aged 18 to 65 for some reason.
Flight risks, I guess.
They're giving them away now, apparently.
Yeah, all right. Well, they're stopped. Well, you're not allowed
free.
to. They're free if they go to Ukraine.
You're a 35-year-old, well-built, hunky guy. Good.
Well,
you look like you could shoot a gun. Here's a free ticket so you can
flee.
Maybe
That's right. Yeah, they're free tickets, but they're only to certain places, and they're one way, so watch out. Yeah. But yeah, I guess you're not allowed to buy a ticket to, out of the country, whether it be
where
China, Japan,
it's to London,
France. Yeah. That's true. They could always switch it on you. It is Russia. You could think you're buying a ticket to... Yeah, you can buy a ticket to Paris. Absolutely. Let me just enter that into the system here, and you are booked. And your ticket might even say Paris. And the pilot might even say you're on your way to Paris when you take off. But what is it about this? Is this plane all men? I've never been on a plane.
Who's running this airline? Oh, some guy named Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Well,
they hired him.
You find yourself in... Donbass instead. And, what can I tell you?
And DeSantis' response was, sue me.
Yeah. So, they will.
They will.
They'll get that opportunity.
Anyway, that's what I got today. Those are the big stories. I just wanted to cover them and make sure they at least got mentioned because I think they're sort of semi-important.
Yes, very much so. I appreciate it. Thank you. And, all right, there's nothing else. That's it. That's it for the news.
That's it.
Okay.
We're off the air.
I can take it from here. I think we have plenty to go on. And so, let's see.
I'll just leave you with this one.
Okay.
And that's Republican U.S. Senate candidate Don Bolduc saying that Maggie Hassan was too focused on abortion and, I quote, get over it.
Oh, yeah.
Ronald Brownstein says, male GOP nominee tells female Democratic senator focusing on the loss of abortion rights to get over it. That should take care of any gender gap issues he's facing.
Yeah.
Can't imagine how any New Hampshire woman in an overwhelmingly pro-choice state would find that condescending or dismissive.
Plus, it's just a good reminder of how situational Republicans are with their get over it messages. Like, I might say the same thing about the 2020 election at some point. Get over it. It was your message for the 2000 election and the 2016 election, for that matter. But all of a sudden they're back to get over it, huh? Okay, right. Well, worse than that, they'll have to deal with, people who are actually paying attention to it because it's a serious issue and think that it's rude and condescending of you to say so. Good news.
So here's Josh Gerstein, who's
Hi, Josh.
Legal reporter, senior legal affairs
There's nothing illegal about
Politico. Judge Deary is asking what his role would be remarked classified documents. How am I going to verify the classification? What business is it of the court, he says, assuming the Trump side doesn't put forward evidence. So, I think that pretty much sums it all up. So take care.
I will.
I'll be back tomorrow. And,
all right.
We'll see if Russia's still at war tomorrow.
Or if there is a Russia, or if there's an us at that point. But okay, hopefully things stay calm. And yes, I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow because that means we will not have had a nuclear war.
At least.
I think so. That's a possible reason why we might speak.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Greg. And so good news from Judge Deary's courtroom here is he's seized the issue and he's getting down to brass tacks on it. And essentially he's asking, the Trump side insisted that there be a special master to sort out what documents are what here. And how am I supposed to sort out what documents are what if you will make no declaration of any kind as to what your position on these documents are? I need to weigh the equities of both sides here and weigh the arguments, and you're not making any, which means I presume normally I would default and say, well, the only people making an argument is the DOJ, so I guess the DOJ wins on that subject. You can't just say, well, everybody else has to do the work. I just get to sit back and enjoy the delay of having a special master here. But that's what they're doing. So, maybe that means he wraps up work on that quickly. But again, I guess the other thing to remember is Trump didn't really ask for a special master, well, for any reason other than to cause delay. That's the empty wheel theory, and I think there's a lot of merit to that. But also the only reason he really wanted, well, not the only reason. Okay, so let's say this. It's not the chief reason to have a special master, in their view, to sort out the questions of whether things are classified documents or not. They intended to use the special master to try to create a claim of executive privilege for themselves and to bamboozle the special master into believing that there is such a claim. It may not succeed, but again, they're more interested in the 2 to 5 to 15 weeks that it will take the special master to finalize a determination. How long will it take for a respected federal judge acting as special master to get down to the task of releasing a report that says there was no merit to the claim? That's the issue here, and not whether we win or not. Now, if we can win, let's say things so that if there's a judge that's inclined to believe us, or a judge that's afraid of being protested or having his family harassed or whatever it is, then maybe they'll rule in our favor, and that would be fantastic. There's no legal basis for thinking that they will, and I wouldn't pin any hopes to it, but I can tell you this. If we win on the question of getting a special master, it will be, a full quarter of the year will pass. The calendar year the calendar months will fall away while we wait for the special master to say, yeah, that whole thing, well, as Greg has it.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, but it's quick for him to say it. Now, how long does it take? When I press the button, it tells me how long the clip is.
That's bullshit.
It's 2 seconds. So it takes 2 seconds to say that. But for a special master to say it, it takes 2 months. You see, you have to put together a whole report that's sourced and citations and is spell checked and the whole thing. So that's where we are. Mark Sumner wrote about it on the front page of Daily Kos. How did he get the editor to work? That's what I'd like to know. Special master tells Trump to put up or shut up, I love it, on declassifying documents in train wreck hearing. Let's see how he puts it here. Judge Raymond Dearie conducted his first hearing as special master over the documents the FBI removed from Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday. The documents were removed far earlier than that. It was the hearing that was Tuesday. And it was not a good day for Donald Trump's legal team, unless, again, you keep in mind that they're really... Is it a good day for Donald Trump's legal team? Well, Marcy would suggest if you're looking at it in terms of did they win or did they lose, then it was a bad day for Donald Trump's legal team. If you're looking at it in terms of did it take up time, was linear time burned, never to be recovered, in determining that they lost legally, yes, well then they won. Because, and again, just to reiterate here, I think it's all obvious, but maybe it isn't. But apparently, well, the theory here that Empty Wheel and others are advancing is that what matters is that time is burned, time is wasted. Why? Because, one, midterm elections are coming, and it's his belief, Trump's belief and his allies' belief, that if they can win control of Congress, they can derail all of these proceedings and investigations by controlling a branch, a co-equal branch of the federal government that can make trouble for us. It can choose to defund the investigation at the DOJ level. It can choose to, I don't know. I guess it could choose to rewrite the laws of, both the laws about espionage and the laws of handling classified documents and the laws for sentencing people if they're sentenced under such laws, etc. They can manipulate the system in a number of ways. And, of course, launch their own investigations. They can launch an investigation into the DOJ investigation that's behind this prosecution and all this litigation. It isn't a prosecution yet, but all this litigation, and create so much work for them that they're distracted from the work of doing the investigation they're involved in. There are a number of ways they can screw this up. And then, of course, if they can waste even more time, they can get it to the stage where they ultimately hope, if Trump can regain the presidency, he just calls the whole thing off and says, you know what, here, they are declassified. I now hereby declassify them, and I'm going to make whoever does paperwork in order to make it really declassified do the paperwork, and I'm going to say it's retroactive, and you're going to say, no, it isn't, and I'm going to say, sue me, and then you're going to find out that you can't, and things are going to go nowhere. So that's the point of burning time, is eventually Donald Trump believes, I'll be president again, and then I can negate this whole thing. If we can just make this legal proceeding last longer than the period of time during which I am not president, then that will be a victory. And I know it's a long shot and it's a long way off, but every day, every minute that we burn gets me closer. And in fact, it gets me closer to claiming, oh, now it's too soon, too close to the election to continue with this, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll take anything they can get. And that's been espoused as a theory on this show in the past about other litigation too. You just keep going, usually in the context of contempt of Congress charges. I'm not going to testify. I'm not going to answer your subpoena. And I'm just going to make you drag this out until either there's a new president or I get pardoned or there's new control of Congress and we dismiss the suit. That's always been part of their strategy. So back to what Mark Sumner was writing, right? Deary, remember him? He's the special master in all of this. Not only insisted that the whole thing should move along quickly, threatening the delay Trump so desperately wants, he instantly blasted apart the idea that Trump's attorneys could cast doubt on whether or not documents were classified while refusing to provide evidence that they had been declassified. You can't have your cake and eat it too, said Deary, using an analogy that we've heard somewhere before about this issue. The bigger point about the classification of documents wasn't just that Deary told Trump's team to take a hike in no uncertain terms if they expected unfettered access to top-secret documents. It was that Trump's team admitted, both in the hearing and in a letter that they sent to the special master on Monday, that the whole purpose of refusing to say whether Trump had actually declassified things was because they were trying to preserve a line of defense against future indictment. Deary made it clear he didn't care. Trump's team had to put up or shut up, and they opted to shut up, which is a small victory in itself, really. As the Washington Post reports, Deary quickly did away with attempts by Trump's legal team to draw out the process and use every minute of the unnecessarily long time limit given by Trump-appointed Judge Eileen Cannon. We are going to proceed with what I'll call responsible dispatch, said Deary. In their earlier response to Deary, Trump's team wanted to walk through the process very slowly, not concluding until Cannon's November 30th deadline. Deary, who has been special master in other cases, saw no reason that the process should last beyond October 7th. That's considerably less time. Deary also made short work of Trump's claims concerning classification. Before this meeting, Deary had asked Trump's attorney to specify which documents he claimed to have declassified. They refused to do this, saying that Cannon hadn't asked for it and that by tipping Trump's hand in the special master process, they would be taking away options for future litigation. Well, remember, of course, let me just add at this point, it's possible that Eileen Cannon will do anything to prolong this process if we ask her, and it's possible that Trump judges at every level will agree if it helps Trump. But what's the purpose of appointing a special master? The purpose of appointing a special master is in every case, in any case in which a special master is appointed. The whole reason they exist is to save the courts time and effort. And so if the special masters say, I can not only save the court time and effort, but I can save myself time and effort, and I'm going to do it, they'll do it. And a normal judge under normal judicial canons will say, well, that's the purpose of a special master. So, yeah, if the special master wants to move things along quickly, fine. If the special master wants to see these things sorted out and classified, and it might cost them a defense at trial, well, the whole purpose of having a special master is to have issues settled before they have to take up the court's time in dealing with it. And so it might not be all that egregious a violation to say, yeah, one of these defenses that you're considering using just really shouldn't fly. It's at least the recommendation of the special master that it not be allowed to fly, though the judge at trial can take that under advisement and come to an opposite conclusion. But it's certainly within bounds for a special master to consider this stuff and to make a recommendation about the viability of these claims. So where were we? In other words, Trump wanted to preserve the idea that he might have declassified documents or that he might not have declassified documents, placing all the documents in kind of a Schrodinger's cat position where they had to be treated as if their status was undetermined. They used the threat of possible future prosecution as proof that Trump might be endangered by telling the truth. None of this struck Deary well. He took less than a minute to dismiss the whole suggestion, telling Trump's team that the government showed evidence that documents were classified, and if they were not going to present evidence that they were not classified, he was going to treat them as classified. Done and done. And judges can do that. So can special masters. I know that's the thing. I guess they thought that there would be some mini trial about whether or not they were classified, but the judge knows very well. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know whether they're classified or not. And it's not my job to know, but it is my job to decide. I asked the government for evidence that it was classified. They said, the evidence is we have written classified on it. Now, that might be weak evidence in normal circumstances, but if it's compared to no evidence from the other side, it still wins. That's the way judging works. And he's explaining that to them now. You're going to have to, it's not even if there was a burden of proof on the government to prove that these documents were classified, the fact that you're offering no evidence that they have been declassified means that the ordinarily weak-ish evidence that all I'm saying is they're marked classified, and the other side is saying nothing, that still wins. Now, ordinarily, the fact that it's marked classified is actually pretty strong evidence because there's a whole process that goes behind marking something classified, and there's a presumption that that was followed. And I guess really if there's any burden of proof, it would be on the side claiming that the normal process was either not followed or insufficient to declare something classified. But if you're not going to offer any of that because you're saving it for trial, you can save it for trial, but you'll lose here. That's all. Anyway, so that's it. There's more to it. There's much more to Mark Sumner's article. You hear the music. It's telling me we have to wait to continue with this. So that's what we'll do. We'll continue with it on the other side. Plus, well, numerous other stories from other areas where Trump is screwing things up. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I got something breaking news to intervene with, and then some other redirection from Greg here. But the breaking news is not breaking. It was broken 13 hours ago, but I just didn't notice it. But I just happened to see AP reporting South Dakota's ethics board won't publicly disclose the quote-unquote appropriate action that it took after finding evidence that Governor Kristi Noem intervened to influence her daughter's application for a real estate appraiser's license. A lawyer for the board told the AP. How interesting is that? Okay, well, it's minorly interesting. Let's put it aside and we'll read the AP story, or at least enter it onto the record. I don't know whether we'll read the whole thing because there's so many other things going on. But remember, we reported on that story some months ago. Kind of a petty thing to be intervening about. But, let's say she'll argue, family is important to me, and everybody can understand that. Yes. All understandable, but then again, the governorship is important, and why isn't that important to you? And, okay. I guess it's just not. All right, let's see. Moving back, though, to Mark Sumner's coverage of what was going on in the special master proceedings. Let's see. Deary made clear several... did I read up to here? Yeah. Okay, done and done. Trump fared no better on other arguments as Deary moved the 40-minute hearing along, coming down with the government on almost every point. If Trump's team is going to follow through on veiled threats, they would go crying to Cannon. It's time that they go try that now. I see. Deary made clear at several points that in seeking a special master, Trump was asking for extraordinary relief. The burden for proving that he deserves that relief is on Trump. Through much of this, Trump's legal team was silent. And again, that's partially because, well, we're losing. And I mean, there's either we didn't know that and it's embarrassing to get taken to school, or more likely, we did know that. We just didn't care that that was the case. Yes, we're going to go in there. The job here is for us to go in there and be yelled at by the judge and be embarrassed. And people will say, they're a bunch of dumb lawyers. But if the job was to burn calendar days and those days are being burned, fewer of them than they were hoping to burn, but more than they were entitled to burn. And they're just saying, I'm getting paid to sit here and get yelled at by a judge. That's the job. So far I'm succeeding. And the real joke is, no, you're not getting paid for that. You're billing for that. That's different from getting paid for it. And I know as a lawyer, you're used to getting your way on things like that because who's going to not pay me? I'm a lawyer. I'll sue you. And it's like free. And I'll win too because you actually owe me this money. And then you realize for somebody like Donald Trump, who's just going to sit there and say, nuh-uh, that, you might come up empty on that one. Anyway, about the closest thing to a win that Trump's team achieved was when one of his attorneys asked Deary not to consult the National Archives about which documents fell within the Presidential Records Act. According to Trump's team, the archives are highly politicized. Presumably that means they're angry because Trump kept them waiting for months and lied at every turn. Deary replied that he wasn't planning to talk to the archives, but he won't hesitate if he needed to. So that's not much of a win there either. The Washington Post conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin called the hearing worse than a train wreck for Trump. She also noted that after weeks in which the nation has been faced with the illogical, law-ignoring, fact-twisting arguments of Cannon, Deary's hearing came as a breath of fresh air and a reminder that not every judge is an unabashed partisan. It was that. Now, here's hoping that the 11th Circuit overturns everything Cannon did in the first place so that Deary and the Department of Justice can drop this nonsense and investigators can get back to polishing up the finer points of that upcoming indictment. Well, we hope so. And by rights, that's what should be happening. But, things don't always go as they're supposed to. Shall we allow the Kristi Noem story to intervene? Because it's probably pretty short. I thought I might take a look at it. As again, Ethics Board keeps, quote, action. I like that they use scare quotes for it. Ethics Board keeps action secret on complaint against Noem. So how do you know that they took an action? Why don't they have to prove that they took an action? I don't know. It's a good question. Stephen Groves is the reporter here for the AP, who writes, South Dakota's Ethics Board won't publicly disclose what that appropriate action that they say they took was. After finding evidence that Governor Kristi Noem intervened with a state agency to influence her daughter's application for a real estate appraiser's license, a lawyer for the board told the Associated Press. The state's Government Accountability Board was created to provide a check on any misconduct by state officials, and the question of whether to discipline the Republican governor presented its first major test. And this is really interesting, and it's bad news for democracy, etc., which, as we know, dies where? In darkness, right? So, how about a little darkness? Scarecrow. It would have been fine for the Scarecrow because, well, whatever. Anyway, the point is, if it's a government accountability board and you won't hold the government publicly accountable, what's the point? That's a pretty good question, don't you think? A lawyer hired by the board, Mark Hay, I guess is maybe how we'll pronounce it, it's Haigh, responded to an open records request by telling the AP this week that the board's response would remain confidential. The board's 3 retired judges considering the complaint, voted unanimously last month to find that there was evidence that Noem, who is considered a potential 2024 White House contender, believe it or not, engaged in a conflict of interest and malfeasance when she held a meeting in July 2020 that included her daughter, Cassidy Peters, and remember it's spelled with a K, Cassidy, and key decision makers in Peters' licensure just days after the agency had moved to deny her a license. After the meeting, Peters got another opportunity to demonstrate she could meet federal standards and was ultimately awarded the license. But the board appeared to let Noem decide whether to defend herself in a public hearing, known as a contested case hearing, or simply accept the, quote, simply accept the, quote, appropriate action and let the matter quietly die. As a deadline passed last week to contest the board's finding, Noem stayed silent and the board's lawyer said the case remains closed. This all looks like, frankly, an ethics board trying to engage in a cover-up, said Kathleen Clark, a law professor who specializes in government ethics at the Washington University in St. Louis School of Law. After reviewing the board's statutes, Clark pointed out that South Dakota law says the board shall conduct a contested case hearing if the board members vote that there is enough evidence to believe an official engaged in misconduct. That vote triggers the statute that makes the board's files open to the public. This appears to be an end run around the required transparency and disclosure, Clark added. The board's attorney said by email that the board has, quote, maintained confidentiality where required by the statute and is confident that it has interpreted the statute correctly. He also took issue with Clark's assertion that the board appeared to be engaged in a cover-up, saying that the two retired judges and retired justice of the state Supreme Court are highly respected in the legal community and have served on this board on a volunteer basis. They have absolutely no reason for a cover-up, as you allege. Although I might have said it's really actually Kristi Noem engaging in the cover-up, agreeing to appropriate action as punishment so long as they don't tell anybody what that action was or even really what she was being punished for. So it's really her engaging in the cover-up and the judges serving on the ethics board agreeing to facilitate it. And the idea that, well, they're definitely not doing something wrong because they are three highly respected people. Well, you know, that's not really much of an answer. Just certainly if over here on the other end of the country, the fact that documents are marked classified isn't by itself proof that they are considered classified by the government, which is really what the question is here. If that doesn't prove it, then I guess then we're open to question over here. I mean, a totally different body of law, and there's no real reason to think why North Dakota law should follow what's being decided in the Southern District of Florida's Special Master Division, etc. But, you know, just comparing cases side by side because they're both in the news, it's just kind of interesting and weird that, how can you prove that that this isn't a cover-up? Well, the answer is because these people are highly respected. And how can you prove that these documents aren't classified? Well, I can't tell you. You have to just assume that we totally did that. Even though, well, are you saying you did declassify them? No, I'm just saying we could have. And so therefore, isn't that enough really? No, it's not. Okay. That's weird. Huh. Well, the fact that these people are highly respected is not actually proof in any sense, or even evidence that tends to prove that they didn't engage in a cover-up. Respect. You know who actually has to engage in cover-ups? Highly respected people. People who are outcasts and who no one likes don't really have a great deal of vested interest in covering anything up. It's too late for them. But anyway, this is a digression. The South Dakota Legislature's Audit Committee. Did I skip I think I skipped a paragraph here. Board members on Tuesday either did not respond to a request for comment. Okay, you don't need to know about that. They didn't ask or answer any request for comment. The board, which deliberated over the complaints for nearly a year, that's how long it takes to do one of these things. Did you intervene in your daughter's real estate licensure? No. Well, we think you did. Well, let's talk about it for a year and then decide. And, why not keep burning those calendar years in between now and when I have to run for president? The board, which deliberated over the complaints for nearly a year in a series of closed-door meetings, has never handled such a high-profile case since its inception in 2017. It's the first time they ever realized that there might need to be ethics in the South Dakota state government, apparently, 2017. It has navigated untested laws that could not anticipate the context around the complaint. Jason Ravensborg, I think that's the name, who was facing pressure from Nome to resign as Attorney General. You remember him? For his conduct in a fatal car crash. Okay, now I remember where he's coming from. Well, he announced he was filing the complaint to the board shortly after the AP reported on Nome's hands-on role in her daughter's licensure. So that is interesting. That does add a twist to things. I mean, they both did things wrong. They are not equal. But the allegation here is, well, he's only filing this complaint about her intervening in her daughter's real estate licensure because she's saying he's a murderer. I mean, come on. Well, he is. And she also intervened in her daughter's licensure. And everybody should get a slap on the wrist. And then you should chop the other guy's wrist off because he is a murderer. Anyway, the South Dakota's legislature's audit committee, controlled by Republicans, of course, also unanimously approved a report in May that found Nome's daughter got preferential treatment. So, they were honest about that. Board members have previously said the laws governing it are not clearly laid out. Karen Soley, a former Democratic state lawmaker who helped create the board, suggested that the board is supposed to have some discretion, describing it as a quiet, behind-the-scenes way to let someone know that they were doing something wrong in state government, if they didn't really need to be called out necessarily. The board is allowed under the law to issue a private reprimand. Maybe it shouldn't be. But the statute says it may take that action at the conclusion of a contested case hearing and after it has determined by a majority vote that there has been misconduct. So there needs to be some clear signaling. Yes, the whole reprimand is private, but there needs to be a public path to it, is essentially how I read this. John Pellicero, a scholar at the, Markula Center, M-A-R-K-K-U-L-A, Markula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. Santa Clara! Can you believe it? All right, well, sorry. We'll bend it like Beckham moment. But anyway, he said that it was best practice for ethics boards to be as transparent as possible once they take action. Yeah, that's kind of what ethics boards are supposed to be about. Across states and local governments, ethics boards follow a variety of procedures, he said, but added most announce the final actions to the public. And that's what makes this one an anomaly. Okay, so a little bit of a movie moment there. That reminds me, I saw, how they sometimes play those Twitter hashtag games. Not always a hashtag involved, but the other day I happened to see one flying by, which I realized very quickly I really shouldn't be eligible to participate in, which was, I think the challenge was name 5 movies that you've seen at least 10 times each. And a lot of people, a lot of normal people saying things like, oh yeah, well, I don't watch movies 10 times. I've never watched anything 10 times. I watch it, it's good, I remember it, and that's the end of it. Versus the way we do things in this house is every movie gets watched 10 times. There's no movie I haven't watched 10 times. Well, that's not really true. That's not literally the case. And at first I thought I misread it. It said 5 movies you've seen 10 times, and I thought they said movies you've seen 5 times, and that's even worse for me. This is like the list runs into the hundreds because that's the way television gets watched here in this house. Our production staff, let's say, loves flipping through the channels, and this is why we have difficulty cutting the wire with live TV. And I know now other streaming services offer quote-unquote live TV, but I don't know. There's something inherent in the way she watches television that she just likes to flip by and find something that's a movie that's familiar that she likes, and I just want to see this part, and then end up watching the whole movie. I've watched 1 million movies 10 times. And the really sad thing about the exercise was how bad many of the movies are and how actively I dislike many of them, but I don't have control of the clicker all the time. And sometimes I just sit there and tolerate it. Sometimes I just hear it in the background. But, Bennett Like Beckham was a good movie, and that's one that if we happen upon, we will sit through, even though we've seen it 10 times already. And that's how come so much of my life is made relevant by offhand movie quotes, in case you were ever wondering about that. Okay, I didn't mean to occupy your time with that. Let me run back over to, well, you know what? I might save this, a note that Greg dropped after his segment on the show. Oh, okay, yeah, and then he designates it as for tomorrow's show. So, yeah, he's trying to save it, and good thing, too, because it's a cool topic, but it's definitely one he'll want to talk about along with me, so we'll save it. But as a teaser, remember that Greg brought up the motion to vacate the chair, the speakership, essentially being held as a threat being used as a threat against everybody, really, against Nancy Pelosi, where they had no chance of prevailing because they were in the minority, but also against whoever might occupy the chair at the time with John Boehner. Maybe next time, maybe it'll be Kevin McCarthy, and using it as a weapon against him to force him even more to the right and to cede even more control of the Republican conference to the crazies. By the way, apparently, I did see on Twitter the other day, did not save it because it's just not enough. It's just not of enough consequence yet, anyway. Maybe later. But Murdery Trader Green apparently has a standing engagement on Steve Bannon's podcast and used the opportunity to say that she was actually thinking of running for speaker against McCarthy and taking control and running Congress the way it ought to be run, according to Murdery Trader Green. Now, she's got no experience with working on a committee because she's been banned to this point. But that would be a fun and interesting way of destroying the Republican Party, but possibly also the United States of America and the greater international world order as well. So it's a risk I'd rather not take. But as a hypothetical, it's interesting. Anyway, we'll return to that topic tomorrow. In the meantime, other things, let's see, sitting around in pocket and waiting to be discussed. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I think I have done a credible job in explaining Empty Wheel's theory about what's going on in the special master situation and the Mar-a-Lago espionage case in general. The delay is what they're after. I'll just give you the title of her post explaining it, and I don't know, maybe a sentence or two to give you the flavor of how she put it, but I think we've covered the topic. Don't analyze Trump legal findings based on the law. Analyze them based on power. That's the title of the piece. I think some people, she says, are making a grave mistake of applying principles of law to Trump's legal maneuvering. Trump's lawyers are not making arguments about law. I mean, that's the guise in which that's the language in which they're speaking to the special master, but he's answering quite clearly also in the legal tongue, not legalese necessarily, but the legal tongue, that you're not actually making a real claim here. And I recognize this, and we're going to wrap this up, I think, around, he said, October 7th, which is not far away. It's on September 21st. So we're out of September in under 10 days, and then it's a week at that point. So, 2.5 weeks, he thinks he can wrap this up. Whereas Judge Cannon said, well, by November 30th. And it may be that they're talking about different things, too. It's possible that Deary says, well, I plan to be done with all in-person hearings on any motions by the 7th. I don't know whether he thinks he's going to issue his report by the 7th. And it may well be that wrapping up hearings on the 7th still doesn't result in a report until late November. Who knows? Anyway, back to what Empty Wheel was saying. Trump's lawyers are not making arguments about law. If there were lawyers concerned about principles of justice participating in his defense, they'd be stridently advising him to work on a plea deal, admitting guilt under 18 U.S. Code Section 2071, removing government documents, maybe even agreeing to the probably unconstitutional, she says, part of the law that would prohibit him from running for president again in exchange for removing the more serious charges under, I'll say, 18 U.S. Code 793 and 1519 from consideration. Such a plea deal is never going to happen. Win or lose, Trump is pursuing power, not adjudication under the law, not even recognition of the law. Now I'm into it, so I guess I'll continue for at least for a little bit. One way you can be certain about that is because Evan Corcoran, who got his and Steve Bannon's asses handed to them in Carl Nichols' courtroom, making legally ridiculous arguments that treat executive privilege as a theory of impunity applicable to everyone who is loyal to Trump, has taken from that setback not that his claims about executive privilege are ignorant and wrong. Instead, he has doubled down on that approach with Eric Hirschman and probably the two Pats, Cipollone and Philbin, undoubtedly believing that so long as he can delay the time until Bannon reports to prison and Trump's former White House counsels testify about what really went down on January 6th, then his people can reclaim executive authority and make this all go away. He's definitely not wrong that he can delay the time until Bannon is jailed, and he may not be wrong about the rest of it. 4 years ago this week, I guess I really have to tell you the whole thing now, Paul Manafort entered into a plea agreement with Mueller's team 4 years ago, and then promptly started lying about matters to which he had already confessed to get the plea deal in the first place. Manafort managed to sustain the appearance of cooperation through the midterm elections, after which Trump took action that would have been politically problematic before it, firing Jeff Sessions and hiring Billy Barr. But again, just to stress what happened here is remember, he takes a plea deal, which makes it look like, oh no, he's going to go to prison. And now there's always the pardon hanging out there, and eventually it comes through. But oh no, he's going to have to go to jail for this. But for less time than he would if he had gone fully through with the trial, but in exchange for cooperating with the Department of Justice and with Mueller's investigation. But then you immediately don't cooperate, which should mean that your plea deal gets revoked and you end up having to go to trial and then go to jail. But if the guy you're covering for is running the Justice Department, then that doesn't happen. You don't get your plea deal revoked, and you don't end up going back to trial, and you don't end up going to jail and staying there. And that's the play they want to pull now. But again, a reminder that that's how, it's not that long a time, 4 years. I mean, day to day, it seems like a long time. But when it comes to those, remember how those wheels of justice turn? It was slowly, right? Right. So it could take like 4 years or so to turn them, or maybe 3 years. And you don't quite make it there. And somebody has to go to jail for a while, but then eventually the plan is, well, we'll win the pardon pen back and then just let him out. So that's something to watch out for. Manafort, right, managed to sustain the appearance of cooperation through the midterm elections, which was long enough for Trump to be able to get comfortable firing Jeff Sessions and hiring Barr to engineer this stuff for him instead. Amy Berman Jackson. Judge Jackson ruled that Manafort had lied during his plea deal, but that didn't matter. Trump and Barr spent the next 2 years erasing every legal judgment against him, and the Trump flunkies that had remained loyal, erasing Manafort's conviction and even his forfeiture. They erased a good deal of evidence that he conspired with Russia to get elected in the process. And in the end, everyone who played a part in this process ended up better off, in significant part because the process, especially Barr's part in it, has never fully been reported for what it was. Trump even used the ensuing process of discrediting the Russian investigation as a means to train Republicans, along with likely Fox viewers like Eileen Cannon, to believe that he was mistreated in the Russian investigation, when the opposite is the case. He was getting special treatment all along, right? Along the way, Trump did grave damage to the rule of law and undermined trust in U.S. institutions. For him, that was a side benefit of the process, but a very important and lasting benefit indeed. He's undoubtedly trying to play the same trick again. Stall the investigation past the election, and then, seemingly confident that Republicans will win at least one House of Congress by democracy or by deceit, flip the entire investigation into yet another example where Trump has not flouted the law, but instead the law has failed to recognize Trump's impunity from it. consider the analysis of Trump's objections to Judge Raymond Deary's draft special master plan. We'll head back to that, and I think we'll be interrupted along the way, but we'll get to it. Consider this, though. As noted, Trump wailed about two things: that Deary asked whether Judge Eileen Cannon's inclusion of any Rule 41G claims, which basically is a legal way to demand property back before an indictment, and that also in her order accorded. Oh, sorry, I've lost the train of the thought here. But let's see. Two things that he asked for: that Deary asked whether he was complaining about whether Deary asked whether Cannon's inclusion of any Rule 41G claims in her order accorded with law, and asked Trump to provide a list of the documents he claims to have declassified. Okay, that was a little bit of mumbo jumbo at the end, but we'll return to this and make some more sense of it after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. It's a race to the finish here, and several other stories now competing for my attention. But let's jump back to Empty Wheel. I said that we could do it in abbreviated fashion, but not really, because, well, why does she spend time in the weeds? Because it's interesting. And why do we spend time in the weeds with her? Because it's interesting to hear how she expounds on these things, and we love it. So where were we here? Considering the whole theme of this piece was that Trump and his lawyers weren't actually necessarily after legal victories. They'd take them if they could get them, but their pleadings in this case and their pleadings in the hearings with the special master are really just about burning time so that they can turn the calendar page and stay out of jail long enough to try to win back the presidency to stay out of jail forever. And it's a pretty cynical ploy, but hey, it's so crazy, it just might work. So where were we? Consider the analysis of Trump's objections to Deary's draft special master plan. And I guess now we'll jump into those objections, which say, we are concerned that it contemplates resolving issues that were not raised by Judge Cannon in her order denying the stay or oral argument. Specifically, Judge Cannon was aware of the likelihood that eventual Rule 41G litigation and established a process by which the special master would evaluate any such claims before reporting and recommending to the court. While the plaintiff is, of course, willing to brief anything ordered by the court under the auspices of the special master, we are concerned that the draft plan directs the plaintiff to address whether Rule 41G litigation should be litigated under case number, and they give the case number of the, I guess, I'm not sure which one it is. And the issue here is this a case to be litigated under Judge Cannon's, in Judge Cannon's court, or do we go back to the special magistrate or the federal magistrate who issued the search warrant, or where do we deal with this thing? And, it's complex and difficult to understand, but I guess we'll plow on here and see if it makes some more sense here. But we're concerned that the draft plan directs the plaintiff to address whether Rule 41G litigation, which again is a way to get your property back that's been seized before an indictment occurs, should that be litigated under case number 922MJ08332BER, which is, I don't know which case, but everybody who reads Empty Wheel knows offhand which case that is. The plaintiff respectfully sees no indication the district court, that's canon, planned to carve out related litigation for a merits determination by the issuing magistrate for the warrant in question. Most importantly, none of the district court's orders have ever indicated that this was even a consideration. Similarly, the draft plan requires that the plaintiff disclose specific information regarding declassification to the court and to the government. We respectfully submit, and remember, this is the part where they're now objecting to the special master saying, look, you got to tell us whether you have any reason to, are you going to claim that these things are declassified or not? Well, we respectfully submit that the time and place for affidavits or declarations would be in connection with a Rule 41 motion that specifically alleges declassification as a component of its argument for return of property. Otherwise, the special master process will have forced the plaintiff to fully and specifically disclose a defense to the merits of any subsequent indictment without such a requirement being evident in the district court's order. I know. Difficult to follow. Empty Wheel picks up again here and says, virtually everyone has suggested that the reason that Trump is balking at the order to tell Deary which documents he declassified is because his lawyers want to avoid lying, and they know Trump hasn't declassified any of these documents. Such observations apparently apply even to Evan Corcoran, who, according to the New York Times, suckered Christina Bobb into signing a declaration that he wrote about a search he said he had done that claimed a diligent search was done, and that has since been proven not to be a very diligent search. Suffice to say, she says, I'm skeptical that these lawyers, at least some of them, would be averse to filing a declaration saying, well, our client tells us he declassified it all. If that would serve Trump's purposes, right? I mean, they could do that. They have the option to say, well, we don't know. And nobody knows. But our client tells us that they were declassified, and we have no way of evaluating that. That's for the court to decide. But that would at least be an answer to the special master's question that doesn't put them on the hook for lying, right? But they aren't filing that because they don't believe that serves Trump's purposes. All the more so given that none of them were in a position to know whether Trump declassified them all or not. And Trump not only doesn't care whether he lies to his lawyers, he's probably constitutionally incapable of doing anything but. That's not the reason why they're balking at Deary's request for a list of documents that Trump declassified. Consider the schedule that Trump proposed, and it's all here in chart form, but it takes them all the way out to late November. This schedule ensures that key decisions come to a head in mid-November, after the election. Trump's goal here is not any final determinations from Deary, absent a determination that the FBI was mean to Trump, just like they were to Carter Page. Cannon's order fairly obviously invites Trump to contest Deary's ultimate decisions so that she can decide the issues de novo. That is, she can review the special master's thing and decide, I don't agree with the special master, I'm not accepting his determination here, I'm going to give my own ruling. She actually comes out and says, yeah, I can do that. Trump's goal is undoubtedly, because it always is, to create conflict, to sow an invented narrative that DOJ is out to get him. And Trump's optimal outcome is not necessarily even that Cannon will say Trump declassified all those documents, including some of the intelligence community's crown jewels. Such a proposition might even piss off the few Republicans who've not entirely lost their mind until such time as Trump convinces them through the process of repetition and demonization that the IC should never have been spying on, let's say Russia in the first place. Obviously beyond their mission, right? Says the Supreme Leader. Trump's goal here is to sustain the conflict until such time as Jim Jordan can save him. And the two of them can then resume their frontal assault against the rule of law again. All Cannon needs to do to serve that end is at some point after the election, declare that Trump's claims about classification, even if incorrect and foolish, are reasonable for a former president. That's all it would take to make it prohibitively difficult for future prosecutors to indict the Section 793 charges. In the same way, Barr made it prohibitively difficult for prosecutors to charge outstanding Mueller charges, notwithstanding the number of self-imagined liberals who blame Merrick Garland for that damage. A more obvious tell comes earlier in Trump's proposed schedule. He wants the classified documents shared with his team, none of whom currently has the requisite clearance, by the way, and he wants them shared this week. Only after that does he want to create the privilege log for the 64 documents his lawyers have had for days, several days in fact. He wants another 2 weeks, so 18 days out of a 75-day process in total, before he makes such privilege determinations. To be fair, that may be what Judge Cannon intended, too. She, meanwhile, will have to review at least one protective order this week. I guess they are finally getting around to that, as we heard that they had ignored that to this point, and may use that as further opportunity to muck in the process, to reinforce her demand that DOJ start the process of sharing classified documents even before the 11th Circuit weighs in. There are probably two very good reasons why Trump wants classified documents in hand before they make any privilege claim. First, because, as I have repeatedly pointed out, she says Cannon used those potentially privileged documents as the harm she hung her authority to wade in on. If Deary rules that, as DOJ has repeatedly claimed, these documents were pulled out not because they really are privileged, but only because they set the bar for potential privilege so low as to ensure nothing was ever reviewed, then it takes one of the three harms that Cannon had manufactured off the table. Every time a claimed harm is taken off the table, another basis for Cannon's power grab and another basis from which to claim conflict is eliminated. Trump needs to forestall that from happening until such time as he has created more conflict, more claimed injury. The other reason I suspect that Trump wants the classified documents in hand before the potentially privileged documents is because he knows that some of the classified documents he stole involve either his White House counsel, which would be the case if documents pertaining to his perfect phone call with Zelensky were in the stash, or his attorney general, which might be the case with the clemency for Roger Stone. DOJ has always limited its comments about attorney-client privilege to those involving Trump's personal lawyers, and that approach has continued since then, even in their motion for a stay before the 11th Circuit. They're not wrong on the law. Classified documents involving White House or DOJ lawyers are obviously government documents, but that wouldn't prevent Trump from claiming they're privileged, or prevent Cannon from agreeing with him on that point. Thus, the delay. Trump needs to delay the potential privilege review until such time as he has those classified documents in hand and can claim that DOJ didn't include all the potentially privileged ones because they assumed that government lawyers work for taxpayers and not for Trump. It doesn't have to be true or legally sound, and believe me, it isn't. It needs to be a conflict that can be sustained long enough to let Cannon decide, and decide in such a way that Trump keeps claiming he's the victim. Like I said, Corcoran may not be wrong that this will work. A lot depends on what the 11th Circuit decides, but a lot, too, depends on commentators continuing to treat this as a good faith legal dispute when instead it's more of just more manufactured conflict. So, very worth keeping in mind in the middle of all this. I know it was a little bit long and it gets weedy and difficult in places, but I think worth having in hand as you analyze what's going on. Let's see. Other things that are perhaps worth considering in all this. Is this, let me see if this, this is interesting. This is Jones' treatment of the case we were mentioning the other day, just briefly, about the praying football coach in, where? Is it Washington State? I can't even remember. Bremerton School District. But the one where he never was fired but claimed he was fired and lied to the Supreme Court in their pleadings about how he had been fired, and then they ordered his rehiring, except he can't be rehired because he was never fired, but never mind all of that. More to the point is that the school district keeps trying to comply with the Supreme Court's stupid order based on a lie, but it's a Supreme Court order nonetheless, right? So we have to honor their legitimacy by complying with their order, except the winner in the case is making a mockery of the victory in the case by refusing to show up for work. So he now occupies what I think is the world's only SCOTUS created no-show public school job in the country, I guess. I mean, they can't create ones elsewhere, but okay. But yeah, Joan points out, this is a little bit of a legitimacy problem, right? Lies and fraud have become the basis for the Trump-packed Supreme Court majority is the now working title of the piece. But yeah, I think the point that's made here is, I know as much as Chief Justice Roberts worries about attacks on the court's legitimacy, what else are you supposed to come away with when, one, they accept the, outright lie that this coach had been fired as part of the oral arguments in the case and keep insisting that it's true, even though it's not and it's demonstrably not true. Then three, they end up being made fools of by the person who prevails in front of them. They order that he be rehired. The school district complies because they honor the legitimacy of the court. The person who doesn't honor the legitimacy of the court is the person who won the case. And instead he says, this is license from the Supreme Court to double dip. I will get paid speaking fees on the conservative lecture circuit, but also I'll wave this order around anytime Bremerton decides that they think maybe they won't pay me because I refuse to show up and coach their football team. Every time they say, well, and if you're not going to coach the team, we're not going to pay you to coach the team. And I wave a Supreme Court order and say, the legitimacy of the Supreme Court is at stake here. If you don't honor this order, you're saying the court is illegitimate. What's actually happening here, of course, is this coach is saying the court is illegitimate by claiming that it was the good faith intent of the Supreme Court that he be paid not to coach. So I don't really know how you get past that. But I thought Joan's take on it might be of interest to you. So perhaps you'd like to peruse that for yourselves. I include that in our roundup. Let's see. Other things. Quick reminder that today being the 21st day of September, you are reminded that it is Earth, Wind, and Fire Day. And tonight you are well advised, I think, to remember the 21st night of September for reasons unknown. I mean, it's all there in the lyrics, but offhand, I couldn't tell you what the reasons were. Anyway, never was a cloudy day. At least we know that much. So, I don't know if it was really because of the weather that you're advised to remember the 21st night of September every year, but poetic license, I suppose, can be allowed here. By the way, also in discussion with Joan yesterday, was the fact that Zoe Lofgren and Liz Cheney had put forward a fairly sharp and serious bill for dealing with some of the problems of electoral college theft anyway, if not necessarily the theft of elections at all levels around the country, and mentioning that this would short-circuit things, and the House was potentially looking to jam the Senate and say, here's our bill. We're practically out of time for passing it. The elections are coming and we'll be leaving to do our campaigning. Take it or leave it. And that the Senate was probably in no position to offer anything to counter. Well, they took that as a challenge. And now I have news from NBC. Senators announced bipartisan bills to stop candidates from stealing elections. In other words, they pushed whatever text they had out the door yesterday and said, there, now we're not going to be jammed. But I assume that they probably will end up being jammed anyway, because who knows how long it'll be before they can get this thing to a floor vote in the Senate. And even if they can do it right away, is it a complete bill? Did they do a good job? Remember, Susan Collins is his Joe Manchin's partner in all this. One, we wouldn't ordinarily put it past Joe Manchin to do a terribly good job on stuff like this anyway. But remember that he did, in fact, do a fairly good job in voting rights areas in the past. It's just he couldn't get any Republicans to go along with his plan, but it was actually a pretty good bill by most reports. So it could be that he's put together a decent part of the project, but in partnership with Susan Collins, we'll see. Anyway, just wanted to let you know that they had done that and have tried to bring that out in time so that they don't get jammed on this stuff. All right, let's see. Other things that need mention. Let's see. Oh, I can do this off the air, or rather, Greg is off the air. This is probably more comfortable that way. But at some point earlier in his segment, he was running through, I guess, the Ukraine stories, and he made mention of the fact that Russia might end up finding themselves treated as a pariah state. And I just learned the other day through, Twitter threads on the subject that too, pariah, turns out to be one of those terms about which we should be especially wary in their use. And I guess, it's been anglicized and used and been given a slightly different definition in English usage, but I did see people bringing up this point, so we try to be, we take up interest, at the very least, in points like this. These are interesting. And it is pointed out that the origin of the word pariah comes from, originally, a member of a particular caste in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu. I don't know how well I'm pronouncing that, but the Pariah, I guess, caste, rather, Paraiyar, which I guess the idea was that it came from one of what they used to call the untouchable castes, and denoted a rather lowly social status, and that made you something of, that's where we derived the idea that in English it really means, an outcast or another, I don't know, in some ways held out as separate and outside of society or conforming with societal norms. However you go to take that. But somebody was pointing out that maybe that's culturally insensitive. And I think the argument was being made by somebody with what we might describe as standing to make such a claim. But I'm not positive of it. I didn't put it aside and look into the background of the person making the claim. I just wanted to put out there that that's a thing now, and it's at the very least is extremely interesting to find out when these things happen and what the etymology and origins of words mean things, and maybe it's something we want to give some consideration to, at least so that it's in the back of our mind. It'll be difficult to avoid using the term because it's going to continue to show up in headlines about this situation with the anglicized meaning attached to it. But the reason for making this objection is in the hopes of raising consciousness. And if it's found to be with merit, then maybe people will look for other words in the headlines and we won't have that problem anymore. Just thought I'd throw that out there and not interrupt the flow of things when Greg was actually discussing news, which is what we meant to pay attention to. Then we have some time later on to pay attention to our choice in language. All right. What other things can we fit in today? Let's see. Perhaps we ought to read this one here, which is from the Washington Post, and if I recall correctly, yes, Aaron Blake's piece. I wonder if this gives any additional color to what we've been discussing in light of Empty Wheel's take on what Trump is doing. Trump's lawyers' audacious quest to avoid echoing Trump meets reality is the current working title, but when it was first parked in Pocket, it was under the title of, where did it go? The Holes in Trump's Latest Delay Tactic was the headline we were working under before. Let's take a look at this piece by Aaron Blake, written yesterday. This post, he says, has been updated with news from Tuesday's hearing. So what's new? For weeks, former President Donald Trump has benefited from the orders of a judge who has proved conspicuously incurious about his public claims that he declassified the documents labeled confidential, secret, or even top secret seized from his residence at Mar-a-Lago last month. Trump's legal team refused to vouch for that claim, but it wasn't pressed on the issue. That appears to be coming to an end. And now Trump's lawyers have lots of thinking to do when it comes to whether they'll do what they've painstakingly avoided, saying what their client says. The special master in the case, Raymond J. Dearie, served notice in a Tuesday hearing that he will likely require Trump's legal team to actually address the declassification claims. At one point, he said that if Trump's lawyers didn't directly dispute the government's argument that the documents are classified, as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it. When Trump lawyer Jim Trusty argued the legal team shouldn't have to weigh in on the issue, Dearie responded, "You can't have your cake and eat it too." It was the culmination of a series of head-scratching refusals from the Trump team to address an issue that Trump has repeatedly addressed publicly, and it came a day after they laid out their case for continuing refusal in a court filing. In the filing to Dearie on Monday, Trump's lawyers made two main arguments on that front. One was that taking a position on the classification status of approximately 100 documents marked classified that were seized on August 8th could jeopardize Trump's potential criminal defense, though I'm not sure how. I still don't see exactly clearly why that would be the case. The other was that Judge Eileen Cannon didn't require Dearie to determine whether the documents are classified. The latter, in particular, is a stretch. I say the former as well. The original order didn't dwell on whether documents might have been classified, but she did direct the special master to review the seized property, manage assertions of privilege, and make recommendations thereon, and evaluate claims for return of property. The Justice Department then asked that it be allowed to continue reviewing the documents, only the documents marked classified, and that such documents be excluded from the special master's review, which drew the Trump legal team into actually addressing the matter. In its filing, though, Trump attorneys skirted the issue, calling the documents' classification status into question, but not actually disputing that they remain classified, and accordingly not echoing Trump's public claims. But that was good enough for Cannon, who denied the Justice Department's request while accepting the Trump team's argument that the fact is in dispute. But in rejecting the request and naming Dearie a special master, Cannon again charged him with parsing the status of the documents. She listed among his duties identifying personal items / documents and presidential records in the seized material and making recommendations to the court as to any categorization disputes between the parties. Again, Cannon didn't dwell much upon the classification issue, and that listed duty specifically addresses personal items and presidential records rather than whether documents are classified. But it also says that he must make recommendations to the court as to any categorization disputes between the parties. Any categorization disputes, emphasis added in that sense, in that reading. Cannon elsewhere explicitly described the classification status as a disputed fact, meaning Dearie would sure seem to be charged with resolving it, and that would seem to involve establishing the two sides' views on their status. The Trump team's other argument that it can't disclose its position because it would jeopardize Trump's criminal defense would also seem to be undercut by the fact that the former president keeps claiming publicly that he did declassify all those documents. That includes as recently as Friday. How might that play in a criminal case? Well, it remains to be seen, but it's not like he's played his case close to the vest. And all of this should be viewed in the appropriate context, which is that Trump's legal team is trying to prolong this matter. That could be because his attorneys fear Trump's declassification claim is false, opening themselves up to legal repercussions, or because they don't think they can prove it. It could also be because they want Cannon, a Trump-nominated judge who has sided with them in controversial ways, to weigh in as much as possible as Dearie's review progresses. Another reason, of course, is that they see value in prolonging these matters as much as possible. Getting a special master in the first place was a way to draw things out and delay the Justice Department's criminal investigation. That's because one of the lessons of Trump's political career is that the lengthier the proceedings, the better it augurs for him. The Russia investigation played out over years, and by the time a bipartisan Senate report bolstered claims that Trump's campaign might have coordinated with Russia in a way that Mueller reports hadn't, those findings were received as old news. People had tuned out. In the case of the documents at Mar-a-Lago, more Americans believe Trump broke the law than they have in just about all of his previous controversies, including the Russia probe. So, Deary, whom the Trump legal team recommended for the special master position and the Justice Department deemed acceptable, has a reputation as being particularly slow and deliberate. But he's now proposed a rather aggressive timetable aiming for the completion of the inspection and labeling process, at least, by October 7th, according to the Trump filing. Trump's team is also pushing for more delayed timetable in general, including waiting to assert whether the documents were declassified until a hearing in late November, at the tail end of the timetable canon set for Deary's review, which concludes on November 30th. That doesn't appear to be any coincidence. If Monday night's filing is any indication, the Trump legal team will try to gum up the works, even with the special master they themselves recommended. But if Tuesday's hearing is any indication, its own pick for special master might not entertain it. Okay. A little bit of additional information and background there. I think we have a clearer understanding of things. Maybe we should have read that one first. It's always difficult to know what you're going to get when you dive into an empty wheel dissection of things. Okay, that leaves us without time for so many other things that we wanted to get to, but we do have Thursday and Friday looming for those. There's lots to do, lots to catch up on. We'll do it next, or tomorrow and Friday, but next will be Justice Putnam bringing you all the things that we haven't made it to today. Let's see what he's got on tap.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Ooh, yeah, here's one. U.S. authorities charged 48 people in Minnesota in the largest pandemic-related fraud scheme yet, stealing $250 million from a federal program that provides, or was supposed to provide, meals for low-income children. Let's get to the bottom of that and find out more next.